back to another episode of What Are You Thinking? I'm Mishali, and this is.
I'm Michelle.
Hi, Michelle. How are you?
I'm good, Mishali. How are you?
I'm good. Let's dive right in. So, what are we
Let's
going to
do
talk
it.
about today? Obviously, I'm coming up with it now. So,
Yes. What are you thinking,
um,
Mishali,
so
this
this
week?
week, this was again, every week something or the other comes up, either with work or otherwise. This
Mm-hmm.
week I was speaking to a friend and also my husband about it, but a friend was
Mm,
talking about how, we were talking about scheduling intimacy, right? Like,
mm,
and we were talking about like couples specifically, but I think, applies, I think, to relationships as well. But let's focus
mm-hmm.
just like on couples specifically.
Mm-hmm.
Scheduling intimacy, I feel like this is not something that's really talked about.
Mm-hmm.
um for some reason, and I feel like a lot of the my like girlfriends are not so comfortable with wanting to schedule that, like how we
Mm-hmm.
schedule everything. And I think today, you have kids, and you have like a bunch of things going on, right? It's not just
Right.
like one thing. So I think, and as a therapist, I think it's something that we do tell our clients about, that I think it's
Yeah.
important to do it, because otherwise you're missing out. I mean, we know how important intimacy is for relationships.
Mm,
So this was something that kind of came up in the conversation, where a lot of my girlfriends I found were kind of, I wouldn't say they were like against it, but it was not
mm-hmm.
something that they wanted to schedule. I think it was something that they felt that was, no, stuff
It
that
should
we
be
shouldn't do.
spontaneous.
Yeah,
Mm,
yeah, it should be spontaneous.
mm,
But in the
mm,
time and in the age that we're living in today,
mm,
I
mm,
I'm all for being spontaneous. I think it's great. It's what makes us human, to be able to be spontaneous. But I
mm-hmm.
feel like there is something there. Like for a guy, it's really not a big deal. I mean, all
Mm,
my guy friends, or even my husband has looked at it, they were like, oh, that's totally fine. They didn't look at it the way that a woman does, obviously, right? Because the way we look at
mm.
intimacy is completely different.
Right.
What do you think? What are like your initial thoughts?
I think I agree with you that it's something that I think in this in this day and age when we all have extremely kind of busy schedules,
Mm,
scheduling something like intimacy of any kind, be it physical intimacy, be it
yeah,
just having like an intimate conversation,
yeah.
is something that I think helps to consider.
Mm,
However, I don't necessarily think that it's everybody's cup of tea, men and
mm,
women, right?
mm,
I think
yeah,
very often, in my experience with my clients, um, men, sure, can, completely go with it and say, sure, sure, no problem. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, as long, whatever it is. But when the moment really comes,
Mm,
right, where there is, okay, it's 10 o'clock, let's kind of, get into our rooms and let's kind of have some time together. It's not as easy, right? It's
mm,
easier said than done. It's not really something, I think women think about it a little bit more before maybe answering that question,
yeah.
because they do realize the complexity of that situation,
Mm,
especially when they have kids. And I'm sure right,
yeah.
when you have kids, it's hard to really kind of schedule anything because anything can pop at any time,
Right.
right? Sure, it might not be like an everyday situation, but it is still kind of hard, I think. I think what does help in terms of scheduling intimacy is deciding that you're going to set aside a certain amount of time together at some
Mm,
point in the day for each other.
yeah.
It doesn't have to be at 10 o'clock we're going to do this, right? I think
Correct.
what helps is figure it out, right? Either you do it in the morning, either you do it in the evening, at night, whenever you get time, but try to make like half an hour, one
Yeah.
hour for each other. It could be over a cup of tea or breakfast in the morning, it could be at night. And mix it up. It doesn't have to be just one thing of in one kind of intimacy every single day, but
Mm,
I think just scheduling it in that way, I
mm,
think, is easier to do and maybe
yeah.
works better than just having like specific time put on the
Right.
calendar for each other.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what we should, talk about is also like when we say intimacy, what do we actually mean by that?
Yeah.
What do
Mm-hmm.
we mean by intimate time?
Yeah.
So my understanding of it, and just like a very basic explanation is, we're not obviously only talking about sex. Obviously, we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about, when I say
Mm-hmm.
intimacy, it could be watching a movie that you've been dying to watch together. It could
Mm-hmm.
be having a cup of coffee together. It could be just sitting and
Mm-hmm.
talking with each other. It could be
Mm-hmm.
just in bed, hugging or cuddling. It could be that.
Mm-hmm.
It could be just taking a walk together.
Mm-hmm.
It could be any of those things that both you and your partner enjoy doing together, that
Mm-hmm.
that brings you closer, that kind
Right.
of builds on the bond that you already have. That's what I mean
Yeah.
by intimate time. Do you want to add to that?
No, absolutely. I think we very often, as soon as we say intimacy and we use the word intimacy, at least, I mean, I think I can just speak for myself, where I think for the longest time I considered intimacy to kind of be physical, sex related.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? I never, for a long time, I think, didn't think or consider or even know that intimacy can be emotional intimacy,
Right.
where you're kind of having an intimate conversation with
Correct.
somebody, or having just intimate time in the context
Mm,
of, like what you mentioned, doing something together.
yeah,
It doesn't have to always involve having sex or having a physical sort of a relationship of any kind.
yeah,
So I think it is anything that one considers to be intimate time. Like you said, time that you are, you're really connecting with each other. You are, talking about it, and that connection could be talking about your day, talking about
yeah,
how you're feeling, talking about, you know, what's going on with you, what are your thoughts for the future, whatever it may be.
yeah,
It's just about time that you're spending together. And like you said, yeah, it can be taking a walk, it can be, watching a movie together, cooking together,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
It can be any of those things. And I
yeah,
think very often when we do use the word intimate, immediately people go to the
yeah.
physical aspect of it
Correct.
and
Correct.
don't really even think about the fact that intimacy is, we mean a lot of other things, in the context of spending time together, in addition to the physical relationship.
But why do you think it's important to schedule it? Like you said, like not schedule it, but like we were talking about, like making sure that you're
Mm,
putting aside that half an hour, 20 minutes, 45 minutes to sit and do this with your partner. Why do you think it's
mm,
important? And also I think we should talk about why is it important, in newer relationships, as well as
mm,
like, relationships that have
mm,
been, it's been a
for a
while. I
long
think in
time.
both, it's
Yeah.
important, but why do you think
Yeah.
couples should do it?
Oh, wow. God, 10,000 different reasons.
All important ones,
10,000.
though. All important ones.
All important ones. All important ones. I think um, what I so often notice is how the relationship of each other
Hmm.
as spouses, as partners, um, gets very often put on the back burner when you become a parent, right?
Yes.
That's one thing that I very, very often see, which is then just being a parent takes over, and people don't pay attention to the fact that the only way that the family is going to function is if you work on your marriage or work on your relationship,
Correct.
and you
Correct.
can't put each other on the back burner and say you're not as important as my child,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Which is where very, very often relationships start having cracks,
Hmm.
because the reason why that family exists is because these two exist and the
Correct.
marriage exists, so the relationship exists.
Hmm.
And if that is not worked on, which involves this intimate time together,
Yeah.
multiple kind of, because you start losing connection, I think. And like we were saying earlier, that we all lead very, very, very busy,
Yeah.
lives,
Yeah.
not just on a physical level busy lives. I
Hmm.
think mentally we're very, very often preoccupied.
Yeah.
There's so many things that are going through our minds. um I also must say that we are so often just hooked on to our gadgets,
I
our
know.
devices.
That's
We
right.
believe that sitting in bed and each person being on their phones is time that we spend together. It's not.
It's
Sometimes
not.
it is, and that's fine. But
Hmm.
it can't be something that you do every single day where there's no kind of conversation that has
Yeah.
happened through the day. So I think it's important for people to recognize the importance of the relationship, right?
Hmm.
And because it just gets so neglected
Yeah.
very, very
Yeah.
often. Um,
But even
the other
in
reason, yeah.
couples, sorry,
No, no,
continue.
no, go ahead. No, no,
But
go
even
ahead.
in couples who are like new, right? Who are not,
Mm,
like you're saying, obviously with kids, 100%, that makes sense.
mm,
But even in couples who don't have kids yet, who are
yeah.
still quite new in their relationship, I think it's also important for them to, put time aside for each other, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. Right, because it's again, you get kind of get caught up with just kind of doing everyday stuff,
Yeah.
going out, having fun, it's all about the fun, but very often those deeper conversations are
Mm.
never really had.
Yeah.
You kind of do things together and you watch things together and you do all the fun activities together.
Mm.
And those are all great and, and intimate moments as well. But
Yeah.
I think, very often the newer couples I don't think they necessarily always give attention to the deeper conversations
Mm.
and the deeper moments in terms of just getting to know each other on a deeper level. And
Mm.
it's very kind of I think very often couples are scared to tap into that with each other,
True.
to
True.
tap into those vulnerabilities. They're scared to get to know people or kind of
Mm.
dig into certain aspects of each other, therefore they like to keep it as almost like don't kind of rock the boat
Yeah.
when the
Yeah.
boat is kind of seeming to be doing okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that again very often leads to discovering things much later
Mm.
about each other, which we like, oh, I never knew this, but it was never a conversation that was ever had.
Yeah.
So these kind of things can very often, the opportunity for these conversations to come up, right, can happen when you're having these intimate moments and you're
Correct.
choosing, and it's a very conscious effort that's made. I think that
Yeah.
one thing, I think in like the scheduling intimacy aspect that we're talking about needs to be a conscious effort.
Mm.
It needs to be a conscious thing that you're doing with the
Yeah.
intention of actually spending time together. It's
Mm.
not like, oh, I'm cooking here but I'm on the phone there, and oh, this is
Yeah.
like an intimate moment that we've had. It needs to be conscious. It needs to be completely all your attention is on each other, and and what you're doing together. And that I think is extremely important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's also like I find as human beings, I think, over the past few years, because
Mm,
of like now all of us have a smartphone, we're so distracted so easily. It's
yeah.
ridiculous. I feel like, even like all of us struggle with it, right? Like I know all of us, like, you're watching TV, but you're on the phone. You're watching a movie, but you're like on the phone. You're doing something else, but you're
Yeah.
also like, it's there. So I feel like this actually today, I feel like it has more value and more importance when you're actually
Mm,
chalking out time and you're sitting there and
mm.
it's literally like you said, like consciously you're like putting aside all your distractions, which is mainly the phone, but you're dedicating this time to that person, and that speaks
Yeah.
volumes, right? It tells your partner that I'm here and it's this is just about you and me. No
Yeah.
distractions, no kids, no other stuff, no whatever else that's going on, because that's 365 days a year. That's day all the time,
Yeah.
right? And that's not going to
Yeah.
go away.
Mm-hmm.
So all the more important, it's more important to actually sit down and give each other. And again, I think another thing to also remember is it doesn't have to be, it's not quantity over quality here, right? It is quality
Yeah.
over quantity. Even if it's
Yeah.
10 minutes, but you have felt like those 10 minutes have really been just about, you and your partner, I feel like that also does it.
Mhm. Absolutely. Absolutely. It doesn't have to be, yeah, large chunks of time. It really is undivided attention, conscious time that is spent with each other, right? And I think, and in doing so very often, I think we even are able to recognize certain issues that might maybe we never really recognize with each other.
Yeah.
Very often I notice myself in the crazy kind of days that we have. Some days I just have to pause, and when I'm kind of looking at my husband, I'm just like, oh, you have another gray hair, right, on your beard. I didn't notice it for the last like 3 weeks. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just like, I see you every day and I didn't notice this, right? And that's when you realize, like, oh my God, like how often do we just pause and just look at each other and really look at each
Yeah.
other and each other's eyes and just look at each other's just faces and just how we are looking and how we're being. Just that moment, which
Yeah.
can be just 2 minutes, can be an intimate conscious moment as well.
Yeah, I remember this experiment that I watched a couple of years ago. You remember this one where they just made like strangers sit in front of each other and just look into each other's eyes without
Mm-hmm.
speaking for like 10 minutes. And I think they were trying to test if people like fall in love with each other like that. Because you're just
Yeah.
sitting there and you're just looking, and apparently that connection is supposed to like trigger off this like immense
Mm.
feeling of love or whatever. I don't remember what the end result of that experiment was. I doubt it was they fell in love with each other in like a
It was
correct
very
me if I'm
led
wrong.
to any success.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But I like the idea of just sitting there and just, sort of, we
Yeah.
don't have to say like, we're like lost in each other's eyes or whatever. We don't have to make it like filmy. But
Yeah.
at least just the idea of sitting there and sort of I think like soaking each other in. Maybe that's a better way
Mm.
of putting it, right? Like
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you don't do stuff like that, right? We don't do
Yeah.
stuff like that on a everyday basis. We don't even think
Exactly.
about doing something like that. You'll be like, oh, he wants to do like it's okay now. Um, but
Yeah, because we take each other for granted, right? We
exactly.
take each other, we so quickly take each other for granted. And kind of, adding to that earlier question that you asked as to why is it so
Mm,
important? It is exactly for this what we're talking about, which is keeping the kind of romance of it all, kind of fueled,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because it's in these moments, when you're kind of pausing and just looking at each other or spending this time together,
Mm,
are also moments where it can also help with reminding each other as to why you're here and why you're doing what you're doing on a daily basis, why you're working so hard towards something. Otherwise, we can again get so lost with all the negatives and all the irritants and all the, you know, the
yeah.
the the frustrating things that happen every day, and we get so sucked into that and we get
Mm,
so lost in it
yeah.
that again we don't pause to kind of look at the person, spend time, have that connecting moment as a reminder, even to say, okay, this is why we're in this and this is why we're
Yeah.
working towards this.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy again to just get so caught up with the chaos and the irritations and
Mm,
the frustrations of every single day. And in reality, what's happening is that you as individuals are not feeling seen, you're not feeling heard,
correct.
you're feeling neglected. And we don't even realize that's the reason why we are having all of these upsets, and we're carrying all
Yes.
of these things. Sometimes it's just about being seen for 2 minutes and feeling appreciated or feeling
Yes.
acknowledged. It's just
Yeah.
about pausing and giving a hug to each other or giving a kiss to each other, and that in
Correct.
itself can make such a huge difference.
Yeah, yeah. And another thing that we also tend to forget is we're all evolving over time. And as couples, we, evolve individually, but also as
Mm-hmm.
couples.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's important that when we do have, when we're taking time out to have these intimate conversations, you're also able to talk about, what it is that has changed for you as an individual in a couple in terms of like, what used to make me happy 5 years ago maybe doesn't make me happy now. Okay, so
Yeah.
maybe 5 years ago, I felt happy or I felt seen or appreciated if you would buy me something. But now that's
Mm.
not so much what does it does for me anymore. Today I'm more
Yeah.
about, I want you to be vocal about it, right? So that
Mm.
also has
Mm.
changed. And I think again that also gets lost in translation, right? And I think you know
Mm.
this from all the work that you've done with, a lot of couples,
Mm-hmm.
communication is, continues to be the number one issue,
Absolutely.
where we don't even realize. And this is even with couples who do take time to communicate with each other, right? We're also like,
Mm-hmm.
in another podcast, we've spoken about communicating and
Mm-hmm.
emotions specifically and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
These things we tend to not really uh, be aware about, because it's not something that we're conscious about, that, oh, this is
Yeah.
what I preferred before, this is what I prefer now. And
Yeah.
so what happens is there's that conflict that comes, because, as a couple, because I haven't realized that this is what has changed in me and this is what has changed in you and this is what we want from each other right now, we're not able to tell
Mm.
each other that, right? And that kind
Yeah.
of gets broken down and kind of lost in communication. So I think taking
Mm-hmm.
the time out to constantly like have this 10-minute, 20-minute conversation and time with each other every day, it kind of keeps
Mm.
you there, no? So you're like, I think you're more sort of conscious about it and you're able to communicate it also, as compared to if
Yeah.
you don't make this time for each other.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. I think, what you're also kind of saying is that with individuals, right? Very often, again, like you're saying, each individual is growing,
Yeah,
right? As you go, whether you're married, unmarried, in a relationship, not in a
right.
relationship, you're growing, experiences are impacting you.
Yeah,
And going back to what I was saying earlier, there's a tendency of taking each other for granted, that, oh,
correct.
I married this person, or I had this relationship with this person, and they're going to be the same for the rest of my life,
Yeah,
right? Just taking that for granted, and they're not going to be the same for the rest of your life, right? And it's important to check in to see if both of you are on the same page, in, as you know, not every way possible, but on certain core aspects that are important to both individuals, to check
mm,
in and to know. And that's the only way of doing it, by
yeah,
communicating, by
yeah,
actually sitting there and having a conversation. Are you going to know if this person is still on the same page as you are in,
mm,
as a consequence of life,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And are you still kind of seeing eye to eye for the most part? Do the same things matter to you as
yeah.
two individuals? And if you don't do that, by the time you know it, you're on a different path, the other person's a different path, and you've kind of just drifted apart, and you don't even know when that happened.
Exactly, exactly. I think
Yeah.
I remember, like, you see a lot of them, they'll say, like, oh, they'll say, don't change, stay the same. No, like, how are you supposed to do that?
I know.
They'll be like,
I
oh, I'm
know.
seeing you after so long, you're the same. First of all, we're not the same, we're definitely different.
Yeah.
But this thing about please don't change, stay the same, that doesn't make any sense to me. I'm like, how are you supposed to stay the same after like 10 years and life has happened to you? How do you stay the
Yeah.
same? And should you stay the same? I don't think so, right? It
Yeah.
should change.
Unrealistic expectation, for sure. And that's such a common, issue that couples come up with, right, when they come for therapy.
Mm.
This is not who I married, and he has changed. As soon as the day we got married, he changed. Or the day we got married, she changed. And I'm very often just like, what was, of course they're going to change. Before you got married, they were your girlfriend or boyfriend, and
Yeah,
after you got married, they're your wife or your husband.
that's
So they are
right.
going to change. Before you got married, you met each other for a few hours a day or a few hours a week. After you get married, you're under the same roof 24/7. Yeah, things are going to change.
Yeah,
If we
yeah,
expected things to always be pretty and like, like a vase of flowers and smelling nice all the time, because if that's what you put across when you're kind of dating and stuff like that, yeah, that's not a very realistic expectation to have.
yeah.
um
Those
yeah,
those
so
those flowers are going to rot and die soon. So you
they
better
do.
so better be prepared for that.
I know, right? And it's such a it's so interesting how dynamics kind of keep shifting and changing with relationships coming, things happening in individuals' lives, be it children,
Yeah,
the birth of children, or parents getting old and coming and living with you, or having pets, or
yeah,
whatever it is. Dynamics keep changing, and the addition of different people and different things keep changing those dynamics as well. And And unless you kind of communicate, and unless you spend time together, and unless you talk about what is bothering you, or what you appreciate, or what you're enjoying, and things like that, neither of you are feeling seen then, neither of you are feeling appreciated then, neither of you are feeling acknowledged then, and you don't know why somebody's doing what they're doing. I mean, there's just leaves so much space for just assumptions, and and making your own narratives. Sometimes that's what frustrates me the most when I work with couples. I'm just like, there's a reason why we are beings that have a language and that have a voice. Use it. Right? Don't assume. Don't assume he should have asked me, or she should have told me. Well, just say it. Why do you have to keep expecting the other person to take initiative? Both of you are in the relationship together, and some people have harder times with taking initiative as compared to others. And it's a give and take. I think I remember one thing that my uncle once told me, which I think stayed with me from the time he mentioned this to me. He always said, relationships and marriages are never 50-50, right? Some days you give 80% and the other person gives 20%.
Right.
Some days the other person gives 20%, and or you give 20% and the other person gives 80%. Some days it's 50-50. Some days it's 60-40. Every single day it's different. It's never going to be, oh, I am going to give only so much and the other person better meet me halfway every single day.
True.
It's never going to be that. And I think that stayed with me in so many ways, not just in my relationship with my husband, but in every relationship. That you're never ever going to always be in a 50-50 place with any relationships. With my friends especially, I know with even with you, there have been so many times where I know that you have given this friendship relationship a lot more than I have given it. Right. And that happens with so many, and vice versa, right? And the same with my relationship with other people or my family. So every relationship works that way. And like you said, initially, it's not just, and we're not, and I don't think we want to kind of just focus on talking about the romantic relationships.
Correct. Yeah, I was just going to say that, we can, sort of extend this to all meaningful, important relationships in our lives, and how, maybe we want to rephrase it and say, scheduling intimacy, but basically scheduling time. I think it's 100% one-on-one dedicated time with the important people, in your life. I think is extremely, extremely important to do.
Yeah, absolutely. All relationships need work and nurturing. No relationship is just going to keep functioning on its own. It's all engines that need to be oiled, that need to be taken care of, that need to be fueled. So no relationship can be taken for granted and can be assumed that it's just going to keep being there, or the person is going to keep kind of hanging around if no effort is being made towards that relationship, or you aren't adding any value into theirs, or they're not adding any value into yours. So like you said, scheduling time to spend together or have a conversation together ever so often. It doesn't even have to be a conversation. It can just be checking in sometimes, in knowing that that the other person is thinking about you, right? Sometimes it's just that I just wanted to check in to see if you're doing okay, and sometimes you just need it, that this person is thinking about you and they took the time to check in with you. And those are also moments of intimacy, right? Or just sending them something, or or just whatever, just giving the person that you care about, or a friend or a colleague or whoever, or a parent or a child, a hug when you want to. It can be any one of the things, but all relationships need that time, need that effort, need that not scheduled, but conscious, undivided time set aside for that person or for that relationship.
100%. I think so too. I think, and we should make that attempt to, pick up the phone. I mean, WhatsApp is free, guys. Just pick up the phone. Make that call. It's okay.
I know.
You'd rather, in fact, today, I feel like, the making the call, I think, was a lot more earlier. And I think a lot of people who are still old school still prefer to pick up the phone and make a call.
Yeah.
I think we're like that. We're like millennial. I mean, sorry, are we millennials? Yeah, we're millennials, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I
yeah, yeah.
think
So,
so.
yeah, a lot of us like that.
Huh?
Compared to a lot of people now who prefer to text or, use
Yeah.
like, other forms, which is fine. But I'm saying that it's not the same. It doesn't
Yeah.
compare to like actually sitting and having a conversation with someone, like not on WhatsApp
Yeah.
or whatever, but actually, having a conversation. So I think that also, right? Just putting some time aside and saying, oh, I'm going to make some time to call this person today and have like a long conversation. That is nurturing
Yeah.
the relationship, that you're giving that time to sit and just talk to this person, undivided. It doesn't have to be that, like, and today all of us are like that. We have friends all over, like, I live elsewhere, you live elsewhere. We have to make that time to, make a
Yeah.
phone call and say, okay, what's up, catch up with each
Yeah.
other. And I think that's important, right? Like, I think a lot of us, we kind of also take our all these relationships, friendships for granted, where we just kind of say, oh, it's fine. And it's like a meme we'll send, or like, oh, forward or whatever. And you're like, okay. But it doesn't, which is great. Of course, you continue to do all of those things. I'm not saying don't do
Yeah.
that. But you know what?
Mm.
Definitely also do this, where you do make some time to
Yeah.
have that proper conversation with your friend, with your, grandparents, with your uncles or aunts or
Mm.
whatever, all of your cousins, all those important
Yeah.
relationships, your
Yeah.
siblings. Just so this is also part of it. This is nurturing that relationship along with those other things that you're doing as
Yeah.
well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think the word to kind of hold on to is nurturing, right? Everything requires nurturing, and to nurture, you need to kind of make these conscious, set aside
Yeah,
conscious time and
yeah,
effort, and
yeah,
an undivided attention.
yeah.
And I think, and I did want to kind of mention this before we kind of maybe even wrapped up today, is that I think this social media, I think very often also just gives us this false sense that we are, very clued
Connected.
in. Yeah, that we're connected to people. Like, oh, why should I call this person? Because I know what's going on in their lives, right? Because, oh, I've seen it on social media.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
know that they
true.
went there. I know because they
Correct.
posted a picture here. Oh, but I reacted on their story. Or, we had a small chat in there, on their Instagram, this thing when I reacted to. That's not connecting, right? And that's not nurturing a relationship.
Yes,
And
yes.
checking in with people or looking at people's stories and posts is not being in touch with the person or knowing what's going on in their
Yeah,
lives.
yeah.
I think we all are very well informed in knowing that social media is not a reflection of,
Correct.
somebody's true,
Exactly.
sense of authentic lives,
Yeah,
right? So great, it's a great space to put across a lot of things, which we all do, and to kind of let people know as to what we're doing in our lives. But I think there's a little more effort that always is required to put in, and that's not enough to
yeah,
just kind of look at social media and check in with each other on each other's kind of DMs, and just believe that you've made that connection for that day, or you've
yeah,
checked in with each other.
yeah,
So
yeah,
give it a little more effort, give it a little more time.
yeah.
um, Relationships are the ones that are going to kind of keep us going,
Exactly.
and keep us young, and keep us stimulated.
Yeah,
So yeah.
yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, I think that's what we want to wrap up with, to remind ourselves and everyone that we're human beings, we're social beings, and it is that connection with each other that's
Yeah.
what's gonna keep us here, keep us longer, keep us happy and healthy. And so the
Hmm.
more time we dedicate to connecting with each other, like what we've been speaking about so far, like
Yeah.
this, dedicated, undivided attention that we give to our relationships. And
Mm.
like we said, it doesn't have to be like, oh, you're dedicated to this all the time or something. It's just taking out that little time to dedicate to
Yeah.
the important ones in your life. So I think it's definitely, important to do that, because, like we said, yeah, we're social beings at the end of the day, and that's what's gonna, keep us going. So yeah,
Hmm.
I think we got that
Yeah,
message across.
absolutely. Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I think that was a important conversation, I think, to have, and hopefully, people took away something with that and will try and make some changes
Yeah, I hope you
in their
guys pick
lives.
up the phone and make that
Yeah.
phone call,
Yep.
to whoever you want to speak to. Schedule time with your
Yep.
partners, with your friends, with your loved ones. And
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yep.
and we
All
will
right.
wrap up and see you
Mhm.
guys in our next podcast. I hope you
Yep.
enjoy. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.